Hey everyone, JSC Cool here, and welcome back to another Skinny Man dev blog video. Today, I'm starting this video with a time-lapse because I couldn't be bothered to record an intro at the time of recording. In this time-lapse, I'm implementing a system of combo boxing for the hitbox and collision detection system. Now, as this time-lapse goes by, I'm going to hopefully try to explain what that is. So, currently, the way things work in the game is every hitbox, say the player or entities, will have to independently check their collision with every single other hitbox that currently exists in the stage they're currently on in the level. What I aim to do here is combine those hitboxes from the level into one combo box, and then use that to make detecting collisions more effective. So effectively what we do is we take the bounding box of all of the objects inside of one of these combo boxes, and we see if the bounding box of that possibly intersects with the bounding box of, say, the player. And if it does, we can then drill down into that combo box and do a more in-depth look at the collision between each object. By building a hierarchy of multiple boxes like we do here in the game, this should theoretically make computing the collisions a lot more effective, as we have to check a lot less hitboxes every time we do a collision check. Additionally, another thing I'm doing here is I'm also pre-calculating all the hitboxes in a stage before any collisions are calculated, instead of calculating the hitbox exactly when it's needed to detect collision with it. This should also theoretically lead to a performance improvement. Alright then, so as you saw in the time-lapse there, I have implemented the collision grouping collision box system into the game, bolted that onto the existing collision system back here. The quick rundown of the way it's implemented actually in collision detection is as such. First of all, when a collision detection is requested, we do the axis aligned bounding boxes test, which checks if the bounding box of the hitbox / combo box is colliding with whatever the other thing that we're trying to detect collision with. If so, there's a possibility of collision. So then we check and see if the first argument is a combo box. If the first argument's a combo box, well, we got to go through each of those parts and check their collisions then. And so we do that by issuing a recursive call to this function here, but this time, instead of calling the the combo box as the first argument, we call one of the sub boxes. Once we've verified that the first argument is not a combo box, we then move on to the second argument. If that's a combo box, we do the same thing, going down into that through each of its components until we get to an object that is an actual collision box that can be checked. After that, we run the actual collision algorithm that does the final collision checks on those boxes there. Overall, a relatively simple system that ultimately hasn't impacted performance all that much, unfortunately. Well, it hasn't noticeably impacted performance. To be fair, it was already quite fast, but I was more looking at the entities department, and I think I know why it hasn't impacted performance in the entities department, but I can't really do anything about that at the moment. That will probably be the next update when I get to that. The next thing I'm going to work on in this episode is the positioning of the 3D camera itself, because the way it's currently built, it is possible to hide yourself from the camera, which doesn't feel right. So ideally, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make it so that when you get behind something, the camera will collide with that object and show you a view more. In this case, it's not going to have the best results. More similar to this. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to do those collision combo boxes, is this will theoretically make this significantly more efficient. And also, the implementation of combo boxes, while not directly relevant, is partially how we're going to actually detect the position the camera should be colliding with. So I guess I'm going to get working on that. Okay, I must say the shadows do look a tad odd up close, but that is only because we're looking up close. Because yes, as you can see, I have got the system for zooming the camera in working. I mean, hey, it's not the most accurate thing in the world, but it ended up working just... Alright, so this function here is what ended up getting modified, which is the camera 3D position simulating function. Yep, and it's now got an argument. Actually, I suppose it had an argument before, but this argument's now different. So the start of this is basically the same, apart from the fact that we moved the base position of the camera up a bit, because before it was centered at the feet of the player, which would often mean the hitbox was intersecting with the ground. This is now centered on about the center of the player, so Nothing over here with the rotation stuff has changed. And we get into stuff where all the new stuff is. So, kind of taking inspiration from the combo box, but I actually realized that we didn't use a combo box for this, as that would cause... Well, it would be more effective, yes. But also, I have no way of knowing which specific combo box it would collide with. So unfortunately, we couldn't do that. But we can still iterate through everything as if we are doing that. So first up, what we're doing right here is we're detecting if we actually need to see where terrain is in between the player and the maximum position of the camera by basically seeing, hey, is there anything in this, is anything colliding within this area? And if not, which is, you know, most likely, then we will end up skipping this entire next section here and just saying, hey, camera distance is the raw 700. However, if there was something in there where it's possibly colliding, we'll then go through this section of code here, which I actually stubbed out with pseudocode and then kind of filled in, forgetting I'd written out pseudocode and had to repaste that in there later. If there was a collision with the previous box, we split the collision box into, theoretically, we select the box closest to the player, and then we use that to narrow down where it is. So in practice, the way we do that is we go into a loop here where we do 10 iterations, because that gets us down from almost 700 to less than 1 in terms of the size of the end box. So we divide the collision area in 2, which is what is done by this midpoint here. We calculate our 2 base points, which are near and far from the camera respectively. Create the hitbox for this area, which it's kind of a box. I didn't really bother going through the effort to actually make the box like properly aligned with the axis, so I'm just offsetting from these 2 points on the X and Z axis, and it seems to be working okay. So then we check the collision of that hitbox here through all the objects in the stage, because we do pass in an array list of things that we have to collide with, so we do have to loop over that. But that is composed generally of combo boxes, so that is fine. And then we check the result of this collision. So if this collision with the level check resulted in a collision, then we set the far position to be what is the current middle position, and then, and otherwise we set the near position to be the middle position. This is narrowing our search in on the half of the area, or the previous area that had a collision in it, basically. And then if it's the final level, then we can simply take the, we can return the actual value that we were at. And yeah, that's there. Then we do our basic figuring out where the actual XYZ position of the camera is, because here we just have a distance from the player. And yeah, that's that. We then have our helper functions here for the base points and camera hitbox stuff. There's a lot of just vertices here. And yeah, that's how that came together. So next I want to try fixing a bug that's been bugging me a little bit in this game for ages, which is that I was not holding W in that situation. It would, I think, and I'm not entirely sure, what happened is when I went into 2D mode, W was pressed down, and the game doesn't update the state of the W key when you're in 2D mode. So when I went back into 3D mode, it was already registered as down. So here, we'll try to force this with S. So theoretically now when I go to the back to 3D thing, I should walk forwards off the stage. And basically the way I have to fix this is I have to press the button so it'll register a press and unpress. Yep, okay. Okay. Yeah, so I gotta figure out fixing that now. Okay, this is actually part of the problem right here. But what I'm seeing is also very curious. I have a if in 3D mode statement here that ends, and then I have another if statement which is once again saying if you're in 3D mode. I do not know why I have these two if statements back to back. And all right, here's my own truth. Did what I did work? Yay, it did. That was a pretty simple fix, but I did find out how utterly horrible my code for handling inputs, especially when it relates to the level creator, is. Oh gosh, that stuff's got to be cleaned up a bit. But what I'm actually going to go clean up next is a lot of this horrible redundant text inputting code, as we have a proper text inputting system now that consists of like a proper text box that you can actually edit, use arrow keys to mouse around, highlight, copy, paste, all that stuff. This stuff for level creator, name inputs, and multiplayer name, like host and stuff inputs, all redundant now, and I should remove this all and replace it with the new proper fancy system that is significantly better and doesn't look so bad. Okay, here's the bug that I was talking about earlier. I don't know why my things haven't happened right now, but here's the bug that I was talking about earlier with all the text starting to turn. You see the J from, and apparently the cursor character, by that I mean vertical pipe. Alright, no wait, that's just a rectangle, isn't it? Never mind. See, that's still rendering, and my highlighting is still, and this is why I want to replace everything with these text boxes, because it works like that. But, for some reason, none of the actual text characters are rendering. Not on the buttons, not anywhere else in the menu, apart from J, Q, and parentheses. And it's weird, because if I go back to the main menu, there's no text here. Go over to level select, no text here, into UGC, no text here. It is strange. There's no text anywhere, and if I don't want to even go into the... Okay, this is a very interesting list of broken characters here. I mean, again, no idea what's happened to the character sheet, or why opening up this part of settings causes this to happen. But here we'll see the entire list of characters that I can be bothered to type at least. Here, those ones also work. That work. So, got a bunch of special characters. For some reason I typed that one twice. The numbers don't work though. Here's where we got capital letters. And then here's what we got in lowercase letters. That's it. That's all that works. It is weird. It is very, very strange. Just get rid of all of this. Restarting the game does fix it, but that is weird. Alright, here we are, fully functional text boxes. I'm going to change their colors up a little bit so they match the background a little bit better, but overall this is a much tidier system than before, and it's also encapsulated well in one place, so I can... Okay, just going through this, it just fucked up all the text. Okay, well, I don't know what's going on there. I am very much confused, but it seemed to be when I put the capital S. Hang on, please hold. Okay, apparently I'm on the hosting screen this time, so I can't show the URL thing, but here, we'll just do with the numbers. Can accept only numbers, and that's it. That's not a valid port, but whatever. Okay, let's go back to join so I can show the... We can do numbers, we can do dots here. Can't do slashes, can do dashes though. Can also do letters. Maybe it's the J that's causing this? I am very confused as to why this is happening. Anyhow. Okay, after doing some poking around in the code here, commenting some stuff out and stuff, I figured out that it is somehow related to this line here where we're setting the clip that prevents it from rendering the text outside of the text box, which doesn't really make sense because all it should be doing is an OpenGL thing to change what is a valid clipping area inside of like shader stuff, which got me very confused. So naturally I decided to start digging through processing source code to see if I could figure this out a little bit, and I don't really think I found anything conclusive or really anything at all about why this might be happening, but I did find this method here. Default font or def. Yeah, I don't know exactly. Well, I mean, I guess the def would be the exception that gets thrown. But still, that's kind of funny that this is a method that they actually have inside of processing somewhere. I think it's also worth noting that I'm not actually using an official version of processing here anymore. As you can see, I'm actually using my own custom distribution of processing because processing development stalled for years and I want to add features that I still should pull request into the actual processing, or re-pull request into the actual processing project. So I made my own version. But anyhow, I don't think any of that would have contributed to this, but it is possible that something that I've patched in has caused this to appear, as this doesn't seem to happen in the current version of the game. Regardless of that, a potential solution could be to only render the text that would actually or otherwise be visible in the box, and don't try to render extra text outside the box. So I think I'm going to try doing that, but that is not easy to do. Okay, after a bunch of kludging around with the rendering code for the texture, I've gotten a system that can basically approximate what clipping was happening before. It doesn't look nearly as smooth, which is so sad because the previous version looked so good. It's so professional. This version looks a little bit more jank, but ultimately it does work, as you can see here. And a little bit, this is what I'm talking about, jank here, right at the end. Letters can kind of clip out of the box there, which does not look the best, but it does happen. And then also they'll just sometimes be more or less there based off what actually fits. And I guess to some extent it's similar on the other side, although the other side I guess is a little bit more conservative in those remarks. But I've also accordingly adjusted the highlight. So if we go highlight a bunch of text here, which you do by holding shift and using the arrow keys, you'll see that the highlight ends strictly at the end of the box over there. And then if we similarly highlight from the other way until we get back here, highlight also ends there and doesn't go outside the box. So this is a functional system for what we had before. Just a shame that clipping just screws it up for some reason. Anyhow, that is now done. The last thing that I am going to be doing in this episode is something that I actually figured out how to do while working on the shadows. So until now, you've always been limited, when in 3D mode at least, to this one specific FOV. But during the process of making the shadows, I found out how you can change the FOV in 3D processing. So we're going to implement a system for that. But the thing I have to do first is actually I have to change how like the 3D collision detection stuff works. And by that I mean how it actually knows where you're clicking, because that stuff is very dependent on the current FOV based off how I written. And hopefully I can rewrite it to still work, but not be FOV dependent. Okay, so actually to start, all I've done is I've replaced the hard-coded constant that was plane distance before with this equation to properly calculate it. Now, interestingly, before what I had this value set to was 622, which I basically calculated from empirically checking what seems about right, because I didn't know what the actual math to figure it out was. But at some point from looking in the processing source code, I found this stuff here as relating to how the camera defaults work, where this is how the actual camera Z's position was sorted out, and through calculating through crunching those numbers, the actual correct value for plane distance at 720p at least, which is the resolution that we target for this plane, was 623.53829. That's only like a little over 1.5 more than the value I empirically measured, which means I did a pretty good job there. But hopefully just this should allow this to keep working. TM? Probably not. We'll see. Alright, it is now technically implemented, although you might not notice a difference because I haven't actually changed what the FOV is yet. But it was just this one line right here. That's all I needed to do. Just perspective, and then the FOV, which is obviously going to be a setting, which I haven't implemented that yet, obviously, so that's not changed yet. Then this function wants the aspect ratio of the screen, which is obviously just width divided by height, 16 by 9, or whatever the actual resolution ends up being. That doesn't matter, as long as it's correct for the window size, it'll look fine. And then these next two parameters is where it actually gets really interesting, as these two parameters control the render distance, or the final, like, sections of the clipping box. Now, by that, I mean, like, where the camera will render, because actually, if we go look right now, so if we free the camera from the player here, something that you may have been familiar with in the past, if you play this game, and actually the current version of the level creator, is if you go out, I mean, yes, the shadows are going to disappear. That's because they leave this clipping box here. I can actually bring them back quickly, but regardless of that, if you started going particularly far away, eventually you just have the level just suddenly disappear and be left with the background. That's because it went outside of the maximum clipping distance. I wouldn't recommend getting this far out, as you can see, it's just starting to look really strange, but that's all down to how the GPU renders it. So with this, I'm able to set the limits of that box for how far away you can see and how close you can see in terms of it rendering things. And I've set the far distance to this very big number here, which is really big, and hopefully it will never be a problem how far away you'll have to get before it'll actually stop rendering. Hopefully they're just pixels on your screen before that happens. That's a smooth experience if you want to create a very big, expansive 3D level. The other more important one that's actually going to come into effect when you're playing the game probably and make a difference is the near distance. Because if you've ever... Actually, here, we'll pause again. If you've ever used Processing's 3D stuff, you'll know that you can... The closest that you can get to an object before you start clipping into it is not that close at all. It feels like you should be able to get it way bigger. I've seen this way bigger in games before. Why does it like start clipping, say, the level creator is not really meant for this fine of movement, but like here, like right now, normally you'd be seeing the inside of this. But currently you're not. You're seeing the outside of it because this other option here, which gets very funky when you set it to real small numbers, so 0.5 is as low as I'm willing to go on that. That clipping distance is usually set, well, but based off the vertical resolution of your screen, I believe. Or, yeah, related to the vertical resolution of your screen. And I think by default, at 720p, it's like 63 or something like that. And obviously with 1080p, it's going to be larger, which is very annoying. Now it's set very low so that when you actually use the new camera clipping feature, you're not gonna see the insides of all these objects that the camera's getting stuck on here. You see? Previously, you would be seeing inside of this wall, instead you're just seeing the wall. So much better. But now I actually gotta try changing the FOV and see if my fix for clicking positions on the screen. Alright, first test with 90 degrees of FOV. Well, it certainly does look a lot more zoomed out, as you would expect, but the real test is, does my magic clicky thing work? Oh! Well, maybe, but clearly those aren't rendered correctly, as I guess the FOV is different when those things are on the screen. Or when I might need to change when the FOV gets switched back to the default for like menu rendering and stuff, as I realize I don't know when the stage, this sort of other stage 3D stuff is rendered. Anyhow, regardless of that, does the clickaging work correctly? It looks like it's working correctly. It's roughly at my mouse where it's being... I'm actually kind of blown away that this is actually working. I thought for sure that there would be something wrong with it and I'd have to spend days trying to think about how I could improve it. Wow. Like, okay, the biggest issue usually with the clicking stuff is right on the fringes, the very corners and edges of the screen. That's where it usually goes way off. I realize there's also actually, it does a raycast to figure out if you are clicking on something, and it might get out of raycast distance here. I don't remember how far it's set for. This, no, I'm not out of raycast distance. Let's see. And then we're gonna go to like 120 degrees FOV after this. I'm out of raycast distance. I'm quite frankly blown away that this worked. Alright, we bumped it up to 120 degrees of field of view, as you can see right here. Bam! Wow, wow, speed! It looks fast. It's no faster, it's just an FOV trick. And besides, these things looking crazy. Wow! It has no idea where to render those things. Shadows are all rendering correctly, but I kind of knew that would happen based off how the shadowing system was built. Can, looks like, yeah, looks like everything is being selected correctly. Again, surprised this whole system has worked. 30 degree FOV, how zoomed in. Okay, we can't see anything. Oh, whoa. This just feels impossible to use due to the fact that it's so zoomed in. But that is what you get. Okay. Whoa, look how tiny and in the distance that looks. Alright, there we go. Yeah, I got it working. That wasn't too hard. I just had to change where we're disabling perspective. I really should go through and add that shader stuff properly. It is literally just I have to say, hey, if you're rendering stroke, also use this shader. That's basically it. But anyhow, apart from that, let's actually go on to adding the settings option now. Alright, the actual setting itself for the FOV has been put in here. As you can see, it's a slider. Don't know what you would expect. The default will be 60 once I actually make it so this can be saved and loaded. That is something I have to do, isn't it? Anyhow, the default is 60. You can lower all the way down to 10 if you can get there. I know this can be a bit janky. There we go. 10, and you can raise it all the way to 170 if you want it to be that for some reason. Actually, what is this? What's this like? Let's go into a level here. Wow, this is downright unplayable here. I mean, I can try. Yeah, I don't trust myself to go any further than that here. Let's drop it all the way down to the other end of unplayable. 10.5 degrees. Oh yeah, hell yeah, you get a nice, frick. A nice sexy look at, crap, I just jumped off the edge. Yeah, the extremes, needless to say, are not going to be particularly playable, but if you wanted to do that for some reason, it's available for you to do. Alright, then that didn't actually take all that much effort to get the stuff saving and loading properly, thanks to the new settings architecture that I implemented earlier in this update cycle. So yeah, I think that's going to be about it for this, this video here. As always, the content shown in this video is a development version of the game, which is not yet available fully for release, but will soon be, because this is going to be the final dev vlog before this update, so stay tuned for that update. But if you did want to check out the game as is currently, you can do that at the link in the description below, and I see you all next time for the update video.